So welcome everybody to our Microsoft 365 webinar series. I have been saying this now for I think 2 years, that we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. So I need to go back and do my math and figure out when we actually started. But we have been doing this webinar series for a very long time. So welcome, we're glad you're here. Our format is we do about half hour of content and then we open it up for Q&A. So feel free at any point to start entering any questions into chat or save your questions, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask during the Q&A time. And with us today, so I'm Jan Lehman. I'm the owner of CTC Productivity, the host of this webinar series. And with us today is our amazing Rafe. We are so happy he's here. He is a rock star, and so super excited to hear his brilliance today on the topic of Power Automate. Just a reminder, because some people think it's funny, we use Zoom for a Microsoft 365 webinar, but there's a reason for it. Well, for one of the main reasons really is that we don't want a speed bump for people to attend our webinar, and there's often people attending our webinar that are on Google and they don't really understand Teams, or it's not set up properly, et cetera. And so we want to make this as easy as possible. We're experimenting today. We've never done this before where our faces are on the screens. But we just figured out today that Zoom does not allow that to go forward on the recording, but Teams does. And so one more time, Microsoft is trumping third-party software. They just keep passing them. So anyway, so we're really glad you're here. And today's topic is on Power Automate, really how to use Power Automate to drive productivity. And then in the next webinar is going to be in 2 months, and it's in March. I'm going to enter a bunch of links into the chat. And that one's going to be on Microsoft Task Management. There are so many things changing. I can't keep up. I'm excited to learn both from today's webinar and the March webinar. But we'll be talking about to-do, planner, project, what's all kind of changing in that space. So it'll be a really interesting topic. And awesome. So let's get going. I'm going to cover off on a couple of things and then we'll pass the microphone to Rafe. And I have to duck because I didn't I have to be over here so you can see the words. So the purpose of our webinar is really to help clients leverage the software that typically they already own to solve business issues and really drive productivity. And so that's what we're really all about. We're often listening for one of these words if in a coaching session or any sort of interaction with clients. And anytime we're hearing, the need to streamline workflow, organization, collaboration, any of those kind of things, we know that there's something in Microsoft 365 that our clients should be aware of. And so those are buzzwords you should pay attention to as well. And if that's what you're struggling with, know that Microsoft is definitely worth exploring. When the pandemic hit, we're slammed into kind of this remote workforce. Now we're kind of at this combo. Some are full in office, some are full remote, some are hybrid, continuing to make Microsoft 365 such an important platform. Having everything in the cloud, being able to access anything on your phone really drives productivity for a remote and hybrid workforce for sure. So that's important to continue to remember. We like to do a case study. So this is, I think, the third month we've been doing this one, so we'll switch it up next month. But this one is about Doug Eagle, and Rafe and his team actually were the ones working with Doug. Doug is a wealth management advisor and just our ideal client, just really believes in the power of technology, is a heart-based leader, just the perfect CTC client. And Doug's challenges, why he reached out for help, is he really wanted to position his company for growth. He had big aspirational goals for his wealth management company. He wanted to leverage his investment in Microsoft 365. He was becoming aware that there was a lot he wasn't taking advantage of. He had tried to roll out Microsoft Dynamics CRM and really had some issues with it. And then he had remote staff that were very talented, but he couldn't quite figure out how to get them in the fold and have that collaboration be seamless. So those are the original challenges with Doug. And by the way, the links that I entered into in chat, there's a link to the case study and sign up for a registration for other webinars, all that kind of stuff. So the solution is we decided to do a retainer-based model. So sometimes our clients want a project-based model because they have a very specific scope. They want to get this one thing done and they know exactly what that end zone looks like. But often our clients are reaching out and they're like, hey, I want to learn about Copilot and I want to learn about this. And it's, it's very undefined. And so retainer model is perfect. It gives us lots of flexibility. So Doug is really excited about having that sort of approach with us. First thing that was done is the team worked on dynamics and configuring it the way that Doug had envisioned that it be done correctly. And they also then focused on what at the time we called like unknown powerful apps, and Copilot was on that list. It's more known now, but that also included Loop. So the results of the work that Rafe and his team did, helping them with dynamics, one, they were able to answer a question in 1 hour. This was a comment from Doug. They were able to answer a question in 1 hour that other resources were taking like 6 months to answer. So it just shows the brilliance of our team. I'm very, very blessed. And they also created customized workflows. If you think about like a platinum, gold, and silver type way of categorizing customers and having different workflows, something like that, they actually created in the CRM, built in a lot of automation. So when a customer or when a client passes away, they wanted to have an automation that would trigger a bunch of different changes and events. And then they streamlined the data entry for onboarding. So some really cool things going on with the CRM. Then they experimented with Loop, and Rafe is the one that coined one. It's like OneNote on steroids. And if you want to kind of get a visual what that might look like, I did attend a Microsoft 365 conference and asked the question of the Microsoft experts whether OneNote was going away, and they said absolutely not. OneNote is just, or Loop is just an additional tool to add to the mix, but OneNote is not going anywhere. And as Rafe has explained to us, Loop is a lot like web parts. So you can kind of have one source of truth where you change information, and then you can pull that information into different tools like Dynamics, Planner, Teams, those kind of things. That's where it's a little bit different from OneNote. And the other thing they did with Loop was really a really key tool that helped loop in, no pun intended, that remote workforce person that helped really build them into that they could be collaborating seamlessly. So Loop should definitely be explored. Then they explored Copilot, Microsoft's AI tool. And part of the key thing, if you've been attending a lot of sessions on just general, AI best practices, is you really got to figure out how to prompt it, how to create scripts. It's really as much important for you to figure out how to engage with it and to leverage the power of it. So the team spent a lot of time teaching their team how to actually do that. They used Copilot to help populate notes from client meetings. And then one of the big things that Doug was excited about is he likes to write white papers. And so he would bring documents into the Microsoft 365 environment so Copilot could leverage that data. And he was creating white papers in half the time that it took before by leveraging Copilot. So some cool stuff there. So we also like to present really the overall ROI of this. So because it was a retainer-based model, he spent about $14,000 for all that work, and I'm sure probably a lot more than that. The great thing about Microsoft 365 is there's no ongoing cost. It's you pay for the software, you're paying for the licensing, you're paying for help to get it configured, set up to take advantage of it. But then after that, there's no ongoing subscription fee or anything like that. So that's what's getting a lot of people's attention in Microsoft. We also like to calculate at least one very specific ROI. And so we looked at, and they said that the client onboarding went from 30 minutes to 30 seconds. That's a really good example of just one function within a business being streamlined and the benefits you gain from that. The quote at the bottom is from Doug. He said he feels like they went from being behind to leapfrogging the competition. So awesome, awesome work there. So I am going to stop share. And now you're going to see Rafe's pretty face because he's so cute.
I'll take that. I'll take that compliment any day, any day. All right.
And feel free anytime as we're going through to start entering questions. If your questions are ready or as we go along, go ahead and start entering them into chat.
All right, we should be up and able to see my screen as well as my face. Can I get a thumbs up, a head nod, a hooray? All right, okay, we keep it exciting here. Since I know a lot of you, it's probably during lunch hour around that time. Try to keep exciting, make sure no one falls asleep on us. Happy to make this interactive. So if you do have any questions as we're going through, feel free to write in the chat. Save your time or save some questions at the end. We'll have plenty of time to get through them as well. Overall, thanks for the introduction there, Jan. My name is Rafe, although I do respond to anything close to that since a lot of people don't get my name right. Just part of the job here. And I get the wonderful ability here to walk through an app that is really, as the name implies, powerful, but I see it often overlooked within organizations, even though when you buy something like a Microsoft 365 license, whether that's Business Basic, Business Standard, Business Premium, Power Automate comes included. So for many of you out there that already have a Microsoft tenant organization, your emails in Outlook, Power Automate in some capability is there for you. And since I don't think it gets as much love as it deserves, that's why we're going to walk through it today. Overall, in today's call, we're going to do a brief introduction, walk through what it is, why, how, all of those good questions, how you can access this yourself, look at creating some examples. Now, I have some pre-built examples created. If we have time at the end, we can even do a little bit more exploration as well. Walk through some integrations for other applications, because within the modern workplace world that you're living with modern technology, everything is talking to each other. So when you look at things like Outlook and Planner, Outlook and SharePoint, maybe you want to look at Planner and SharePoint, or even something that you say, we use some third-party application. And for all of you that know me, I say, Microsoft first party is the best party, but there's still some really good third-party softwares out there. I will definitely not ding you for using those. There is a chance that you can actually connect that using Power Automate. So just getting your systems talking a little bit more, walk through some full workflow creations, best practices, and then next steps. So that's the agenda. It's quite packed. If you hear me talking a little bit too quickly, feel free to raise a hand, hoot, holler, let me know, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. So without further ado, let's dive on in. So Power Automate, what is it? Why do you want to use it? Well, think of either tasks that you do yourself, or maybe all of your colleagues within the office, those tasks that you do repetitively, so 5 times a day, maybe once a week, but it takes you 2 hours. Those type of tasks that can be kind of menial, manual. This is where Power Automate comes into place, because it says, how can we automate what you're already doing to save you time to then work on other tasks, or give you more time to look at the bigger picture, the forest level view. So Power Automate is say, what can we automate within your organization? Make it go happen as soon as you click a button, or just does it at a specific time frame, freeing you up. It also is looking at standardization. So let's say you have a staff member that does a task this way. You have another staff member that does that same task a different way. Power Automate is going to say, not only are we trying to automate your processes, we're trying to standardize it, put it into a nice logical workflow. So then that way it runs the same way every time. You get the data that you need every time, and those actions are being done for you, making you happy and healthy. So when we talk about productivity, when we talk about saving time, when we talk about ROI, Power Automate is usually one of the first apps that I look at and really recommend to others. We build it up together, and from there, you can really see some powerful tools. So for example, when Jan was giving that wonderful example about Doug, what we did there is we did something as simple as a toggle button that is a yes, no. When there is a new client, you flip that toggle on. It takes all of the information that's already been inputted into their CRM, where they're storing all of their client information, and it outputs a PDF. It outputs a document in the format they want. They've standardized it. They don't need to create it from scratch. Power Automate does it off of a trigger. So that's the importance of looking at what can we really get off of your plate, get off of your staff's plate, because if they have Microsoft, they can use it as well. And that really comes into the role of Microsoft Power Automate. My biggest description is, if you can dream it, we can probably find a way to build it. It is that intermediary tool that says, let's connect these two. Let's connect these three things together, put together the different tools in one place, and being that almost little handy elf helper, if you will, building those things for you, getting tasks done behind the scenes without you having to worry too much about it. Integrating these apps, so Power Automate, with it being a Microsoft tool, as you probably are already aware, Microsoft's a pretty large organization overall. So it has hundreds, if not thousands, of pre-built connectors to a lot of the large softwares out there. You could think of a Salesforce, you could think of HubSpot, you could think of, throw out Monday.com. It even has connections too. So there's a lot of pre-built in there. Of course, the Microsoft tools already have that connection in place. I can't say that every single software application out there has a connector in Microsoft yet, but give it time and you're usually going to see that coming around the bend. So that's kind of the introduction, what it is. It's that workflow tool. It's the ability for you to create those automations. And almost in every single role, we can probably find a way to utilize Power Automate in some function format and make your life a little bit easier. So Power Automate is, you can consider it a software. You can consider it an application. All of you probably have access to it already within Microsoft 365. We're going to automate those repetitive tasks. We're going to reduce errors. Now, when we try and reduce those errors, does it mean that we're probably going to have to spend some upfront effort into figuring out what is the best way for the process? Power Automates are only as good as you build them or what we tell it needs to happen. So when we look at Power Automate and what it's doing is, it's usually not the case where we just build a 3-step flow. It's done, it's complete. It really is an evolution of your overall business optimization processes as a company. Because I don't know if any of you have ever read those children's book, if you give a moose a muffin, if you give a mouse a cookie, those type of things is once we build it, they usually ask for more and more and more. And that's the goal of it. We're not chiseling out this Power Automate in stone. We're saying, let's try and create a base. Let's look at building this automation for you within Microsoft, included within your license. And then we can always add on to it. We can go ahead and customize it a little bit more. Do we want to add in more steps to it? It is a naturally evolving. And a lot of times when I'm looking to build these Power Automates, I spend an hour or two sitting down with our clients, sitting down with the people on the other end of our video screen here saying, what's your current process? How can we flesh it out a little bit more? Is that your desired process? Because just because you're doing it now doesn't mean that we have to build it that way. We can kind of use your imagination. Let's shoot for the moon here and build it as much as you want, which in the end, does it take some time to build it? Yes. Does it take some time to make sure it's working great? It does. But just think of that one example where the Power Automate can save you 30 minutes a week. What's 30 minutes times 52 weeks? Now times that by how many years you have. So those 3 hours we spent building it, you're just going to gain all of that productivity ROI throughout the lifelong term and having the ability to even edit it, update it as business needs evolve. So how do you access it? What is this? So if you are used to going to your Microsoft 365 on your internet browser, so that's whether you use Edge, hopefully, or if you use Chrome or Firefox or Safari, any of the other ones, you can still access it. The best way is by going to your internet browser, typing in office.com. And once you do that, you will be able to see in the upper left what I like to call the waffle or the 9 circles or the hamburger menu. Take your pick there. And when you do that, you'll be able to get and see all of the applications within Microsoft you have available to you. Power Automate, if you don't see it by default, you may not just because you've never used it before, but by clicking on the waffle, searching for it, you will find it. It is there. It is available for all of your staff. Now, would I say and tell every single staff member to go to Power Automate? Probably not, because they could probably get into some danger territory pretty quickly. But you all have available, go to office.com, click on your waffle, and it should appear to you. Or the unique URL is flow.microsoft.com. Why I bring this in is if any of you are tech readers, you like to see the news, you like to look at documentation. There's some crazy people out there, right? I love to do it myself. Is you can see Power Automate interchangeably with the name Flow. It used to be called Microsoft Flow. Now it's switched to Power Automate. So just keep that in mind. Flow, Power Automate, pretty much the same.
Are you saying Microsoft changes names sometimes?
As often as you change your stock. Yep. So just want to keep in mind, if you see the both, if you're saying, ooh, this Power Automate sounds really exciting, you go to a website and you see the word Flow, same thing. And actually myself being, old school in Microsoft now, is I even call it Flow sometimes and let it slip. So just keep that in mind. So let's go through how the different types of workflows that you can create. So the good news is you have quite a bit of flexibility, which you would imagine. I said, if you can think of it, we can probably create it. You have a lot of good starting points. So you have things like automated cloud flows. So these are things where the Flow or Power Automate will check every single time that an action is made. So you don't need to do any manual triggers. You don't need to click a button. You don't need to do an action. Think of something like when a file is uploaded into a SharePoint site, which SharePoint is Microsoft's cloud storage system. When you upload a file, an action can happen. You don't want to have to check yourself. You just want to trust that flow to do it, and that's what your automated is going to do. Maybe we have our instant cloud flow. This is a great example to say when someone clicks a button, someone clicks a toggle to yes, it then says, okay, we want to have this action happen. You can then click the button, have it run. Whatever flow you build will then be created. So you don't have to have it automated. You can have more process and control over it. You also could do a scheduled. So maybe you want an email sent out every day at 9 o'clock in the morning to all of your staff members. We would schedule that 9 o'clock in the morning, send out an email to these users with whatever information we want to pull from Microsoft, and it will run every day just like clockwork. That's going to be your scheduled. You can pick and choose each one of these when we are building the flow, so it's not like you always have to stick with one. Each unique scenario, circumstance of a Power Automate flow or workflow we want to build probably calls for one of the different triggers. I wish I had all the time in the world, and Jan and the team knows I could probably talk on this for about 2 hours. We're not going to focus on the desktop flows or process mining just yet. That we can always do in a future call. Really just want to lay down the groundwork and the basics of some of the things you can do. So we have our automated, we have our instant, we have our scheduled. Most of those are going to be where you start. Now, if you say, I really want to get my hands deep into this, I want to start trying to use it, you could also describe it. So tell Power Automate what you want it to build. It will do its best to get there, so you can even play with it on their own. Just keep in mind, if you do go off and you have a couple of minutes here after lunch and you want to start building these things because you're getting excited, just keep in mind that it is going to do those actions. So if you say send an email every minute to this person, it will do it. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're not bothering anybody else on your team. It's powerful. You probably want a good team or some resources there to figure out how to build it. But
Jan, don't do it. Don't do
Right.
it, Jan. We don't want an email every minute from you.
send them to Nancy. Send a Teams message every minute. Yep. Okay. We heard that loud and clear. There are some templates as well. So I don't want to say that everything needs to be built from scratch. The templates tend to be more on what I would call the basic side. There's always more that we can build from it. When you look at building these out, you really want to see it as what is a trigger, then action. Or think of it as a if this, then that. And we're going to be asking that question 100 times as we go through for each piece. Then that from there, building out our diagram, building out our workflow to figure out how we want to have this go from start to the end. And we'll probably go through a couple different iterations, usually how the process works. So let's look at some examples, some live examples that we've done before. So automating task creation from a SharePoint list. If you are not familiar with what a SharePoint list is, think of a really exciting Excel, but within the world of SharePoint, where you can mention users, you can have different color coding, you can have a modern, sleek functionality of what Excel used to be, but now we're putting it in the cloud, allowing for co-authoring, putting in different processes, procedures, and standards as well. And you could say when an item or a line item is added to a SharePoint list, it creates a task and planner. Or you want to be exciting, go vice versa. You could also look at streamlining approval. So one of the first apps that I build in a lot of organizations is something like a PTO or time off request. Rather than just having someone shoot an email to HR and hopefully they remember to write it down or send the approval back. What we can do here is create an approval process that gets you the information you need. So think we could start with something like a Microsoft form, which is your data entry. So you ask for what is their name, what is their email, what days are they taking off, what times are they taking off, who their direct manager is. Quick example. Once they submit that form, Power Automate would find that trigger, Microsoft form has been submitted, then let's send an approval to the direct manager, or let's send an approval to the HR manager via email, via Teams. You're getting these processes in place where then the person can just click on one button. Everything is being tracked. Everything is being logged. You're creating procedures in there. And the good news is by using Microsoft Forms, maybe a SharePoint list, and that approval process through Power Automate, other than the time it takes you to build that, you didn't have to pay for anything else. It's included. All of those tools are included with your licensing. Now think of notifications. So maybe you want to have a email every time someone uploads a file to a SharePoint folder. Now, I don't recommend that because you could be getting thousands of emails, and I don't like to send you emails. Maybe we want to send you a Teams notification. Still a lot of notifications, so that's where we can definitely go back and forth and say, this is what you want. Is this really what you want? These are the potential risks that can come from it. But automating that, getting people the information they need in a timely fashion automatically, it's pretty powerful stuff. And of course, integrating with Teams. So as you move more of your internal communication, as you shift to being more of that instant messaging type of communication within your organizations, more and more people will be spending time within the Teams application, which I can spend hours talking about. Teams, I will not, don't worry, I don't want to bore any of you here today. But having that connection between the different apps, whether it's SharePoint, Teams, Planner, Forms, or maybe even one of your CRMs that are external, or even something like DocuSign. I know some people on here that have used connections to DocuSigns. These are the type of things you can use, you can think of. And even though if these type of integrations aren't coming to the top of your mind in your daily work, this is when I would usually say, okay, for our next week's call, let's give you some homework, because I love giving out homework for anybody that knows me. And we would say, okay, talk to your staff members, have them write down those repetitive processes, and we could probably find a way to fit it into one of these buckets, build it out, make you happy, make them happy, save the entire org a lot of hours. Let's dig a little bit deeper into these examples. Now, there are millions of examples I could give you. Don't worry, we're not going to do an exhaustive list of it here. But on the left-hand side of the screen here, this is what the new Power Automate looks like. So you're going to see rectangles with pluses, with rectangles, and different type of diagrams. Now, you may look at this and say, that looks a little crazy. I don't know how to read that. It's a little bit out there. Don't worry, the more you use it, you will all become experts in no time. And even if you're one of those people that say, I never want to learn how to do this, that's why you can use us, right? We can help you build it. We can show you, we can walk you through, and give you enough knowledge to be able to manage it moving down the road, and maybe add in some additional features as well. This one here is actually a pretty simple flow. I built some flows that are about 100 rectangles and branches together, all the way moving across. So it really is changes depending on what you want to build here. But we have an approval. For each approval that we get, we're going to say, did that approval come in as approved? Did it come in as rejected? If it was approved, send the approval email. If rejected, send the email rejection. A flow like this doesn't take more than about 15 minutes to build. A lot of the time is us figuring, how do we want to create it? Are we sending the approval to the right person? In the approval email, do we have the right text? Because I don't want to write demo dummy text, and the next thing you know, someone feels offended, even though it got approved. So those are the things that we'd work with together. But overall, when you look at flow, after you build quite a few of them, it becomes second knowledge. And it really is, think of it again. If this approval happens, if it is approved, then that. If the approval is rejected, then that. So always ask yourself, if this, then what do you want to happen? And we could go about 10 more levels deep if you want 100 things to create. So for example, we could say, if it's approved, send an email letting that person know that it was approved. Maybe you want to create a planner task and assign it to someone so then they can do that action of putting in the PTO information into your HRIS, your HR information system. Or maybe you want to say, go do this, write this down, do that. We can create tasks, we can send emails, we can create lists. Goes on forever and ever here. How about those?
Can I ask a question? Do you mind?
Yes.
I'm going to go rogue and break our process.
Do it.
For Power Automate, could you set up something where let's say you have a date and you want certain things to happen like 2 weeks before, 2 months before, and then two weeks after, 2 months after? Could you set something like that up, that you have like an event date and then all the reminders go out at the right times?
You absolutely could. So, and like I'm going to say this 100 times, there's 1,000 different ways we can build it. One of the ways that I've seen it done before is we're going to go back to that SharePoint list, which is, like I mentioned, that kind of, I like to say, the Excel on steroids within SharePoint. And within the list, you put in the name of the event, you put in the start date of the event, and we would have 2 different flows. One flow, for example, would say when someone puts in the name of the date, they put in the start date, we would then populate 4 or 5 other columns that would be 2-week reminder, 1 week reminder, 5-day reminder. So then we're actually filling out what you want that calendar to be. And then that also gives you the ability. So if you say, I'm noticing that that date's on a Sunday and I don't want to send out that email, you could still manually change that date if needed. So we would first build out our days, and that would be an automated cloud flow, right? Because we're saying when, title, date added, let's fill out these other dates. We would also have a second separate flow that would be a scheduled flow that would say, look at all of these columns. If one of those dates in there equals today's date, then we need to send out this email. Then we need to send out that email. So there's 2 different flows. And from that, you're now coming together to the solution you're looking for. Could we probably put it in one? Yes, but we don't want to throw everything together, because if there is a change, if we need to make an update to it, we want to keep it as simple as possible. But I think that would be a perfect example.
Awesome. Thank you.
Since we paused here, and I'm going to grab a quick drink of water, any other comments that you want me to cover right now, Jim?
No, it's awesome so far. Anybody, there's no questions. I did not see any questions in chat. So if anybody wants to pipe in now, you can. Otherwise, he'll keep going and open up for Q&A. But no, it's great, Rafe.
Perfect. Moving on, onward and upward, right? So let's look at notifications. So maybe you want to send an email notification on task assignments or updates. Now, if you're using something like Microsoft Planner, the good news about these Microsoft tools that a lot of times are included with your licensing is they have notifications built in. So if you create a planner task and you go ahead and assign that task to a specific user, they'll get notifications if it's overdue, for example, if the task was assigned to them. But if you want to go beyond, so let's go beyond that and look at what else can we do. We can send emails based off of planner tasks. We could send emails based off of lists that you create. You can also say, let's send a notification in Teams, or let's send it to people outside of the organization as well. If you can dream it, you can build it. Most of the time when we look at notifications, we want to say, let's send it via Teams first, if at all possible. So we're going to help people really start to integrate it, use that application more and more. We can use email if needed as well. Really going to be on that particular time, what we're building, what we're looking for. And you can customize it. So if you want to add customized text, if you want to add hyperlinks, you want to add images. I've seen organizations have a list, for example, of everybody in the organization's birth date. Not the actual year they were born. We make it be the current year so no one can actually tell how old they are. Or if we look at having someone's anniversary date at the company, right? We could then have a flow that says when this date comes along, send an email within Teams to the entire org saying, congratulations, Jan, you've been here for 10 years, you deserve a soda. Best example I could come up with at the top of my head, maybe more than a soda. But those are the type of things, so we can get as creative or basic as you want, as long as it's saving you time, it's increasing that collaboration, moving back and forth, we're doing our job. So let's look at integrating with Teams, because we talk about Teams a lot, and we will be on Teams, hopefully, with our meetings here. Have to throw that out. As we look at what you can do in Teams. So maybe we want to post a task in Teams. Maybe we want to send an alert to everybody. Maybe we want to send a message in chat as well as to a channel, to an entire group. Have them then communicate, collaborate on Teams on top of that. All of that is possible. We can specify where do we want to post it. Do we want to @mention users, which if any of you are very well versed in the world of Teams, @mentioning gives them that notification, gives them that ping, that pop-up here. So really almost anything you want to do within Teams, we can probably find a way to do within Power Automate. And of course, we can always get creative as well, because if there's a will, there's usually a way. Some other good examples of Power Automates that we built, in addition to things like the PTO, looking at birthday, anniversary messages, automatically creating folders. So I see this one a lot. So with having files within SharePoint, which are your shared team files, you can see those files within the Teams applications. Maybe you want to have a process is when we create a new client folder on the client SharePoint site, you want to have 10 folders that are your template folders automatically created, put in there. So now you have a beautiful template for your staff members to start working on. That's a pretty easy and quick building flow. Maybe you want to have it when a new folder is created, we move all of our template files in there. So maybe you have Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF templates that you need to fill out for all clients that you get or all customers. We can have that flow in. Maybe you also want to add on, let's send a notification when that new folder is created to make sure that someone didn't accidentally duplicate a client folder, or to make sure that that client has been really truly onboarded and ready for that process. You can mix and match as you need. Most of the flows that we're going to create is going to be doing some type of trigger, action, notification with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of variations between them. So overall goal is, when I'm working with Power Automate, bring up your ideas, bring up your thoughts, talk to your staff members, see what's taking up time, and we can probably find a way to create it. As you build a full workflow, so workflows can be as simple as if this, then that, 2 steps, quite easy. They can be hundreds of steps long. But when you're truly looking at, okay, this might be a process that is going to revolutionize our company, save us a lot of hours and time, these are the questions that you want to really think of. So identifying workflow needs. So what is the actual issue that we're trying to solve? Well, that may seem like an easy question, is talking through it, making sure that we have the full start and where we want to end up. We can then fill in the intermediate steps, analyze your processes and pain points. So it could be as easy as, let's send out a Microsoft form seeing what are people's pain points. Or if you have staff members under you and they keep complaining about this particular process, write that down. That's a great place, an early, easy win for us. From there, we're going to then design the workflows. My personal preference is, as we're talking, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint. I'm going to put in boxes, rectangles with arrows. We're not actually creating our actions and steps yet. What we're doing is trying to figure out, can we map up this entire process and make sure we don't forget a step so we can get as close as possible to the end goal before we actually start designing it. In a lot of ways, building Power Automate workflows is a lot like painting. 90% is in the preparation, making sure everything is good to go. And the last 10 is actually, now let's build it because we know what we want to do. Mapping our triggers, action conditions, all possible. Conditions can really vary depending on what you're trying to build, but we want to test it, right? So we probably don't want to say we are creating a workflow and we're going to alert the entire organization, test it 100 times, and then we send 100 test emails to the org, or 100 test teams. We wouldn't do that. We'd probably say, this one user, let's test it, let's build it, let's make sure it works well before we roll out to the entire organization. We're going to deploy and optimize, so we're going to push it out, have people test it, come back a week later and say, ooh, there's this change we want to make. That needs to be done differently. Or why did we choose this text in this Teams? Because it's actually confusing people more. Those are the things that happen, and then we can easily fix and work on that as on a go. And that's why we like to say, rather than just this project, this Power Automate is going to take 2 hours. We're going to bill you for the 2 hours. We're done. That's it. It never ends that way. It's always, let's build onto it. What can we build after? What can we add into it? And so that's why we look at the more holistic Power Automate processes overall. If you're building a simple one yourself, you can probably create it, move it on, but we want to make sure it's done right. Sharing with the team, we monitor usage to make sure that there isn't a problem with the trigger. I myself, with the thousands of Power Automates I've built, I've had it before where there was one piece that we didn't add in or we didn't think of, and it was causing the flow to trigger every single second, which means an email was sent every second, and that was for about 10 minutes, and you can imagine that's quite a bit. So in those cases, we test it, we make sure it works well before we push it out, making sure that all of the kinks are ironed. And then we refine as need. So it's almost like that process, the circular process of starting with it, building, assessing, creating, looking back, and then we're usually moving on to the next flow or the next tool that we can bring in. All right, best practices, start simple, especially if you're going out on your own and trudging through the world of Power Automate. Think of some small things like notifications. If this happens, send that. Look at your templates. That's going to be really helpful to give you some new ideas, get those creative juices flowing, thinking of what can you do. Ensuring security and compliance. Now, some of you that might be admins within your organizations, you might have more rights to see different things. The last thing we'd want to do is have a notification that says when a folder or file is created in the leadership SharePoint site, that it sends a notification to the entire org. Just keep that in mind. Most of the time, you're probably not going to run across this too much, but security compliance should always be in the back of your mind there. Setting appropriate permissions, so who can see this flow, who can you share it with? You can share flows between people, you can copy them, you can paste them. It makes building much easier and having everybody else use it. Document your workflows. And I'll even go as simple as when you're creating your workflows, give it a name that you remember, and it tells you exactly what the flow is doing. Usually when you have a flow that you create in your first one, you pretty much know what it's going to be. After you create your 30th flow, and a lot of the names are similar, it's really hard to remember. So having a good naming structure, nomenclature, writing exactly word for word what that flow does will help you in the long run. Stay updated. So flows are pretty resilient. They're going to keep running as long as you tell them to, as long as you have them turned on. But just like Microsoft likes to change names sometimes, it likes to change workflows, or it likes to change triggers. So if you kind of were looking at our backside, there was a send an email V2. That was the trigger, the action there. And so pretty soon there's probably going to be a send an email V3. So you're getting more features in. You're probably going to have to update them a little bit. You also want to make sure that the account you use to connect your workflows is still in place. So let's say I build a flow with one of your executive assistants. They end up winning the lottery. They leave the org. That flow is still set to their account. We want to make sure that that's transitioned to somebody else, that the flow is not running through them, or else when you unlicense them, that flow would stop working. So there is a couple of things to keep updated on, just manage overall. We can show you where that is. We can show you the admin portals. Not too bad, but keep that in mind. And there's always new features. You can engage with the community here. And as we're doing our weekly meetings, as we're talking about, what's going to be their next step, we can always go back to older flows, make sure they're done, add on to them, which really helps to ensure that we're buttoning everything up, as well as also giving us a lot of runway for some future changes, updates, workflows that you're probably going to want to come through. So when you look at driving productivity, Power Automate is going to be a key piece to it, even if you haven't used it yet, even if you're brand new to the Power Automate world. There's sky's the limit. You can build it as you need to, streamline your company workflow or your own, use better collaboration, have notifications go where they need to, stop with all that menial work, and make technology really work for you, which is a foundation of responsive and agile organization. Power Automate is going to stay through the end. It's not like an application that's going to go away. More and more, as you look at even AI, Copilot can help you build these. So as technology gets smarter, Power Automate is only becoming more and more important. Having it in your organization, using it for those key features, definitely going to set you apart, as well as let you get off work a little bit earlier, hopefully. So that's what I had about Power Automate. I'm happy to take, and actually, I think we're going to go back to you now, Jan. Is that right?
Yep, let's do a couple. Ray, if you go ahead and go to the next,
Yeah.
go to a next slide of that. And while I'm tap dancing on a couple slides here, you have a couple questions. Sophia had one earlier about Excel, and Eric had one recently about accounting. So if you want to look at those and be ready when I'm done. So just a quick little backstory. A lot of times people will stumble upon our webinar on YouTube and be like, who the heck is CTC Productivity? So just a couple quick slides. This is really our proven process in working with companies. It depends on where you are in your maturity of leveraging Microsoft 365, but often we're starting really at the beginning, and it's really assessing, peeking under the hood, looking at your security permissions, where your data is, and making sure things are set up properly. Sometimes it involves migration, getting you off Google onto Microsoft, or migrating data off the server to SharePoint. And then we spend a ton of time in the optimize phase. That's where we'd be doing things like Power Automate, Power BI, leveraging really all the software that's there. And then ultimately our goal is to wrap up, not have you be dependent on us. We are very blessed. We have clients for years. Some are on the call with us today because there's just, we attract continuous improvement mindset people that just want to keep going and looking for the next thing. So that's wonderful. Rafe, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. And then lastly, we kind of have a unique approach to helping companies leverage 365. Adoption of the software is going to be your hardest struggle, trying to get everybody to use it. It is group software. I think, Arnie, you're the one that made me realize that it's really group software. It's not individual software. And so there needs to be a common understanding of how everybody is using it for it to be driving efficiency. So we say it's important for companies to come up with what we call rules of engagement, or your operations manual. Is OneNote OneNote going to be the place where everybody's going to put meeting minutes and agenda items? That's important to figure out before you would do OneNote training, so everybody understands how they're going to use the tool, when they would use the tool. We also believe in one-on-one training in addition to group training. A lot of people, power users or people that are scared of the cloud or whatever it might be, might need a little bit more hand-holding to get them over the hump into adopting the software. So we have kind of a unique approach recommendation of how training should be handled, but all of that is really kind of an ongoing process and helps with adoption. So Rafe, oh yes, last thing. So there's, let me see, I'll enter the links one last time. If you're interested in the next webinar, it's in March. That's going to be on all the task management tools in Microsoft. Register even if you don't know you're available, because you'll get an email of the recording. So even if you can't attend, you'll get it afterwards. And then there's some other links in there as well. And then Rafe, you had, yeah, at least those 2 questions, and there might be more if people want to unmute themselves.
All right, so let me just end slideshow here so you can see my beautiful face here again. We're all back together. All right, so great question from Sophia, looks like the first one here. So I talked about using SharePoint lists, which I highly recommend, and I know a lot of people from the CT side, we're experts in building them, so we can definitely help you. But the question here is, can you use Excel or an Excel document to create tasks in Planner, for example? And I will say yes, but. So yes, there is a wonderful trigger action that can pull from Excel. The thing you need to keep in mind is anytime you're working with automations and processes, you need to have some type of structure available so that Power Automate can read your data. So if you are one of those companies that have Excels in 2 lines, you take a break, you have another line, and then there's just all different types of information on one single sheet, it's not going to be able to read it. The best thing you're going to want to do is create a table within Excel that has rows and columns. If your information is in a very beautiful database kind of set, rows, columns in a table, yes, we can pull from it. We can do some wonderful things from Excel. A lot of times I don't see that, so we might have to do some data cleanup first and bring it together. So keep that in mind. But yes, you absolutely can within Excel, or even you could do Word with templates, items like that. Okay, do you have any examples of how Power Automate has been implemented with accounting processes? Yes, and I'm trying to think of probably the best one that I can use here. So what I have is, there is one organization we built a Microsoft form for. It asks for the person's name. It also is asking for them to upload in this case, it was their receipts because they're truck drivers and they're going and buying gas, they're buying things at different gas stations, all of that. So they needed a way to say, we need all of our different receipts brought into one place so we can process them, write them into our QuickBooks billing software. So we built the form, we have them upload the image, the file to that form, submit it. As soon as that form gets submitted, it's going to create a document and take that uploaded file and put it into their accounting SharePoint site in a folder called pending. That's the first step. So we're getting our data entry in, we're getting those receipts in. People aren't emailing them left and right. They're not being lost. They can take it on their phone, push it through the Microsoft Forms. So we're trying to make it easier to get that information in. Once that document is received in the processing folder, we then have what's called metadata. So it is a column next to that file name that gives a status. So then once the accounting person looks at it and says, yep, this is a legitimate receipt for this many gallons of diesel for your truck, or why did you spend $1,000 on Snickers bar? They can reject it. So their status can be approved, rejected, pending, pending manager approver. When it's approved, that file automatically through Power Automate is moved to the approved folder, filing it away in that date by that person. If it's rejected, it sends an email back to the person that submitted it saying, this file has been rejected. Please talk to this person if you need further information. So that's a great way if you're looking at files. When you're looking at the approval processes, so just like if you wanted to approve even something like someone is being terminated or let go, or someone quit, and you need to cut their final check, we can do an approval process there to make sure everything is done, moving throughout, and everybody knows all of the tasks, actions that they need to get done. So those are some quick examples there. A lot of times I get questions about, can we connect things to QuickBooks? Well, it depends what type of QuickBooks you're on. It depends what type of other software you're using. But if you're looking at the actual operations and processing of accounting, there's a lot of things we can do in Power Automate.
Awesome. Rafe, great job. I don't see any more questions coming in. Anybody's welcome to unmute if that's easier for you. Rafe, just so you know, Susanna is your biggest fan. She was laughing during all your jokes. So I could,
Oh,
I could
lovely.
see her.
We
I
know
could
who we
see
need
her
to send the
screen.
fruit basket to, right?
That was so cute. Thanks for having your camera on, Susanna, so we could see that. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions.
And I'm also like, even if you have the pie in the sky type of idea, feel free to unmute. If, you know, can you do this? Can we do that? Or if you want to stump me, we should have if you stump me, we give you a cookie as well. I love those type of calls.
Come on, Arnie and Nancy, stump Rafe. This will be good.
Well, not internal. We can't, this is only for external, right?
I love it. I love it. I think we're good. So thanks
Okay.
everybody for attending. I appreciate Rafe. You're a rock star as always. That was so helpful and informative. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Take care.